But for Western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, it's windy. It's also cloudy, and there'll be some spots of rain with gales in exposed spots. Sunday sees rain move in from the west, but that dissipates by the afternoon.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton, and breaking tonight, with Chernobyl captured by invading Russian forces and 57 Ukrainians reported dead by the attacked country's health minister, we're living through one of the darkest days in modern European history since World War II. We'll be hearing from brave Ukrainians determined to show their nightmare to the world. One of the country's top news anchors, Mariska Podolka, who's having to shelter in her bathroom and says life there is even more horrible than anyone can imagine. She and journalist Maria Pisanenko join me from Kyiv in just a few minutes. Then at 10:20, one of Putin's most outspoken opponents and Russia's greatest libertarian voice, the jailed and exiled political heavyweight Mikhail Svetov, joins me alongside Mesa Gifford, the Brit who fought against ISIS in Syria but witnessed an airstrike for the first time on European soil and is now desperately trying to escape Ukraine. Unparalleled insight coming throughout the show from Ukraine. As Putin openly threatens nuclear warfare, Boris Johnson showed his mettle by calling out the tyrannical Russian president for his attempts to leave a bloody legacy.
We see him for what he is. A blood-stained aggressor who believes in imperial conquest.
Despite the West's desperation to avoid World War III, we cannot let this Hitler-like figure get away with his attempts to rebuild the Soviet Union. I issue a rallying cry to Western leaders in my digest next. Then my superstar panel will weigh in on today's shocking breaking developments. Joining me in the studio, the broadcaster Carol McGiffin, the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and the journalist and author Amy Nicol. But after condemning Putin for choosing a path of bloodshed in Ukraine, what action can Boris Johnson take next? Anne Widdecombe thinks she has the answer. Forge a super alliance of countries stronger than even NATO that will leave Moscow quaking in their boots. The former Tory minister is here at 9:30. Did the weak actions of Biden and Harris empower deranged Putin to launch his offensive on Ukraine? The madness of crowds author Douglas Murray explores that in Uncancelled at 10:40. And with war erupting in Europe, will the West finally stop its obsession with wokeism and get serious about real threats to our existence? Well, Mark Dolan breaks that down as The Outsider at 9:45. After Boris seemed to suggest that military intervention is on the table, should we send British troops to Ukraine? I'll get your verdict after a fiery clash at 9:20. Plus, as Trump is lauded for calling out the danger of NATO members' reliance on Russia in 2018...
Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened.
So is the Donald right to say that Putin would never have invaded Ukraine if he were still president? We'll discuss that at 10 p.m. That's also when you'll get a first look at how tomorrow's newspapers are covering this crisis. And with peace across the continent and beyond in jeopardy, why are Britain's spy chiefs now being told to go woke? The media buzz here at 10:30 as usual. And don't forget, before the end of the show, we'll once again crown a Greatest Britain and Union Jackass too. So do stay up with us. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Today in England, at least, was meant to be one of celebration. Freedom from the tyranny of COVID restrictions that have haunted us and dominated our public discourse for the past 2 years. But it's a very different sort of tyranny, threatening peace in Europe in the most serious way since World War II as we come on air tonight. Over the next 2 hours, we'll cross live to Ukraine, but also bring you the sharpest and most uncensored analysis of the war in Europe from Britain's best experts, journalists and commentators, because that's what we do here on GB News. Plus, all the breaking developments as they happen, starting with the news headlines at 9 with Miranda Shunka.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening. The top stories. Ukraine's port of city of Mariupol is under heavy fire, with a diplomatic source saying hundreds of explosions have been observed, while a senior US defense official has said that Russian forces are advancing closer to Kyiv. It comes after Russian forces captured the Chernobyl nuclear plant, which is just 60 miles north of the capital. Ukraine says 57 people have been killed and 169 were wounded today. In response to the invasion, the Prime Minister has announced the UK is imposing the largest and most severe package of economic sanctions Russia has ever seen. Boris Johnson says new trade restrictions are being introduced and there'll be further sanctions targeting 100 individuals, entities and subsidiaries.
We will continue on a remorseless mission to squeeze Russia from the global economy piece by piece, day by day and week by week. And we will, of course, use Britain's position in every international forum to condemn the onslaught against Ukraine, and we will counter the Kremlin's blizzard of lies and disinformation by telling the truth about Putin's war of choice and his war of aggression.
The Prime Minister also rejected President Vladimir Putin's claim that Russia was left with no choice but to take military action.
I'm driven to conclude that Putin was always determined to attack his neighbour, no matter what we did. Now we see him for what he is, a blood-stained aggressor who believes in imperial conquest.
Well, the US is also ramping up sanctions against Russia, as well as taking action against 24 Belarusian individuals and entities for supporting Moscow's invasion. President Biden says Kremlin claims it reacted after being threatened by Ukraine and NATO are completely unfounded.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time.
Well, £77 billion was wiped off the FTSE 100 as global markets tumbled following the incursion. UK stocks fell 2% in what's been the worst day for the markets in nearly 2 years. Companies with close links to Russia were hardest hit. And the Home Secretary has announced all Ukrainians in the UK will have their visas temporarily extended or the status changed in the wake of Russia's invasion.
Putin, stop the war! Stop! Putin, stop the war!
Well, earlier, hundreds of people staged a demonstration outside Downing Street calling for more drastic action from Britain and other international allies to help Ukraine. Dozens of protesters also gathered outside the Russian embassy. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
At 5:55 Moscow time this morning, with missiles raining down on Ukraine, the tyrannical Russian President Vladimir Putin issued this chilling and deranged warning to the world.
And now some very, very important words for those who could be tempted to intervene from the outside. Whoever tries to hinder us, and even more so to create threats to our country, to our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate. And it will lead you to such consequences that you have never encountered in your history. We are ready for any development of the events. All the necessary decisions have been made in this regard. I hope that I will be heard.
That's the same Vladimir Putin, now openly threatening nuclear warfare there, who just 16 days ago sat on the other side of a very long table and assured the French President Emmanuel Macron that de-escalation in Ukraine was assured. That prompted Macron, you probably remember, to march into Kyiv and assure the highly sceptical Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky that peace in our time was guaranteed. Well, Macron got it wrong. He is the Neville Chamberlain of 2022, and the history books will judge him harshly. As I've been warning for weeks, an appeasement policy against Putin was a fool's errand. That's because it became clear just hours later when explosions began going off all over Ukraine as the first invasion of a sovereign country in Europe by a major power in 80 years was underway. In a line that will go down in history books, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg declared this.
Peace on our continent has been shattered. We now have war in Europe on a scale and of a type we thought belonged to history.
President Zelensky, a former comedian now leading Ukraine through its most dire moments since the Nazi occupation in World War II, was unable to provide much reassurance for his citizens as he made this video on his mobile phone.
Today, Russia started an invasion of Ukraine. Putin started a war against Ukraine, against the whole democratic world. He wants to destroy my country. He wants to destroy our country, everything we have been building, what we live for. I address all Ukrainians, and primarily Ukrainian servicemen, who have already taken the first of the enemy's strikes and are repelling it with dignity.
Of course, none of us wanted this war. It was right for Western leaders to offer the potential for a diplomatic solution down to the very last moment. And we must too admit that the West has made a hell of a lot of mistakes in our dealings with Russia and Putin, allowing Europe to become reliant on Moscow for energy, turning a blind eye to illegal outrages in Crimea and close to home in Salisbury, and underestimating his totalitarian tendencies. But Putin has a deranged obsession. He is a dangerous, cold-blooded liar, and nothing was going to stop him. Certainly not a meeting with a French president with small man syndrome. Boris Johnson has called the crisis right from the start, as he explained in this powerful address to Parliament in the past few hours.
For this, Putin will stand condemned in the eyes of the world and of history. He will never be able to cleanse the blood of Ukraine from his hands. I'm driven to conclude that Putin was always determined to attack his neighbour, no matter what we did. Now we see him for what he is, a blood-stained aggressor who believes in imperial conquest.
Putin is certainly seeking a bloody legacy here, and he has an innate, unshakable desire, really, to start rebuilding the Soviet Union. He knows the West are desperate to avoid World War III and will do anything to stop having to put boots on the ground. But the West cannot allow this Hitler-light Putin to win. And the sanctions measures unveiled by the UK, EU and US this evening must only be the beginning of the pain we will bring to his despotic regime. Now, breaking tonight, there is fighting on the outskirts of Kyiv as Ukrainian forces battle to recapture an airbase which was taken by Russian airborne troops. It's one of the many deadly clashes that have broken out over the country of 40 million after Putin launched his sickening invasion in the early hours of this morning. Last week, I spoke to Mariska Pawdalka, the star presenter of Ukraine's biggest TV network, 1+1, which is based in Kyiv, and she joins me live now. Mariska, this was the news that you didn't want. You prayed that it wouldn't happen. What's the situation on the ground in Kyiv tonight?
What you just said about the fightings at the outskirts of Kyiv for the airport, and we have the news, official news, that it's ours. Ukrainians are now not letting any Russian planes to land there. That was their plan. That's why there was such a great fight for this airport, because that's where they wanted to land their troops and wanted to start invasion to the capital, because they are targeting the capital. Actually, what is going on, I think it's the worst scenario that we even didn't expect ever. And I mean, I still don't believe in what is happening. It's still very difficult to comprehend, even though I was one of the first people on our television, because I work for the morning shift, to start this coverage maybe half an hour after the first shelling that we heard in Kyiv, because I was actually getting ready to go to work for my morning shift, and I was listening first to the UN Council and then to Putin address, and right he was done. The live coverage was over. 5 minutes later, I heard first explosion in Kyiv, and it was like surreal. I mean, I would say that very many people still over the previous weeks, even months, when so many intelligence from Great Britain, the United States said that it's going to be an invasion, it's going to be an invasion, but still people didn't believe. It looks very much like, you know, this Hollywood movie, Don't Look Up. It's very much the same. But what I can say about today, it's much worse that anyone could expect from Russia, but it's much better than anyone could expect from Ukrainian army and from Ukrainian people. That people are so resistant on the one hand, so calm and well organized. No panic, yes. I mean, in the morning we had people joining us, celebrities, to our live coverage, trying to support each other, to say that we're here, we stay here, we're okay. But they were all crying, actually, on our live morning show.
And Mariska, obviously your husband is a former Ukrainian MP, but he had been training with the reservists. Has he been called up to fight at this point?
Yes, I mean, 4 hours maybe ago, we just said goodbye for a while, and yes, he's off. And I don't have any connection with him because he is not now supposed to use his mobile phone for obvious reasons. So I hope, I just believe and I hope that he would be safe.
Well,
but he's taking orders from his commander, and the only thing I can do at this moment is just pray. And actually, I would now I would like to say thank you to those Russian people who are going to the streets in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, because I know what it's like for them to be in the streets. They're not like Ukrainians. We're used to go into the streets if we don't like something that the government is doing. But for Russia, it's a big courage now to be going into the streets, and we know that a lot of them are being detained, but we believe this diplomacy from the Russian streets can also help to stop.
Absolutely. I was just seeing actually footage of these unprecedented protests on the streets of Russia, which the police are obviously trying to crack down on.
The latest news in the capital that we're supposed to be either in shelters or in the safe place, because we're expecting airstrikes. And hopefully there's a good news that this airport that you were talking about, Hostomel, that there were fights. First information was that it was Russian, now it's Ukrainian, and that was the biggest fight at the outskirts of Kyiv that people heard.
Very positive news, and we will keep our fingers crossed.
That's the best news of tonight for
Mariska Pawdelka, keep safe. You've got a very important job, obviously, rallying your people across this through your TV network 1+1, but please do keep in touch with us, and we're praying for your husband as well.
And actually, we now believe in Ukrainian army much more than in the sanctions, but still expect the sanctions, including sanctions from the United Kingdom, can help us. So thank you very much for all the support and for all the rallies and messages that we're getting from the United Kingdom.
Mariska, thank you so much. We're going to go now to Maria Pisaenko, a freelance Ukrainian journalist, also on the ground in Kyiv. Maria, what's the atmosphere there?
Yeah, right. Good evening. It was actually really nice and even therapeutical for me to hear Mariska Pawdelka talking to you, because she's also in Kyiv and she's in the same conditions as I am, as my family is. So it was really nice to hear from her that, yes, we do believe in Ukrainian army, and yes, we have good news for this evening that Hostomel airport is under Ukrainian control, though there is one worrying, information. There was a statement issued by the defense minister that the first wave of attack was repelled by Ukrainian army, and Russia is seemingly is getting ready for the second wave of attacks, which could be also with airborne military parachuting in Kyiv. And hours ago, we've received the news from investigation journalist Christo Groziev about 18 Il-76 planes, military planes going to Kyiv. So really not great news for today. And I see you are showing the pictures of airstrikes all over Ukraine, which were happening today. And my prayers, the prayers of all Ukrainians now, are going to the families of 57 Ukrainians who fell victims to the Russian aggression. Yes. All these events of today.
And that's been confirmed by the Ukrainian Health Ministry tonight, which is just the most terrible news.
Right.
We're taking a look now at a live shot of Kyiv. Maria, can you tell us if there have been any forms of missiles or blasts so far this evening?
Yeah, right. I guess kind of 2 hours ago, we've heard these faraway explosions. So I live in central part of Kyiv, and the explosions now, we already know, are coming from Hostomel airport. So there were still battles 2 hours ago, and these were the sounds of repelling the attacks of Russian, planes by the Ukrainian military and Ukrainian planes. And now I'm watching this live picture from Maidan Nezalezhnosti, and honestly, I really I'm close to tears, because it's something else than that I usually see in my city. It's always bustling. People are all over. The traffic is heavy. People are going on their evening strolls after a long day of work, and now there is, you know, a sense of terror in the streets. There are Ukrainian military in the streets. Yes, we do feel safer when we see Ukrainian military, but you understand that something is terribly off. Something is happening, strangely happening. And also one detail I would like to mention is from today, I've learned one terrible thing, that the war in the city does smell. It has a distant smell, and it is really the smell of something burned because of these strikes, because of fires started by these strikes. And the fires were not only in the city, there was several spots in the city targeted. So the main place of intelligence office in Kyiv, in Podil region, and also the smoke came from Boryspil and from Hostomel and Brovary, where the strikes were also today taking place. And you feel this smell of
it must be absolutely horrific. Thank you so much for that brilliant reporting on the ground. Please do keep safe. That is Maria Pisenko, a freelance Ukrainian journalist. Maria, we will keep in touch with you, of course, over the next week. Let me bring in my superstar panel, the political commentator and writer Dominique Samuels, the columnist and media personality Carol McGiffin, and the author and broadcaster Amy Mikhail. Dominique, you hear those brave journalists in Kyiv, and it really does bring it home how terrible this situation is.
Yeah, I think it is terrible, but, you know, I might be a bit unpopular here, but I feel as though, specifically with some of our mainstream media, there has been a lot of scaremongering and hysteria where this is concerned, and I feel as though that has had some impact on the situation that we're in right now. Our country and America has fanned the flames of this conflict, you know, warned people that Putin is going to do this, whilst at the same time not really doing anything to counter it. We've essentially waited for him to invade Ukraine and then announced a set of economic sanctions that we know will only really take effect in the long term. So how long is this conflict going to go on for? It's going to go on for months. That's Biden's strategy. And at the same time, we're not being honest with people here or in America, because economic sanctions on Russia means higher inflation, higher energy prices, and more pain for British people here. And I think the media at the moment is focusing on the wrong thing. Let's talk about how's this going to impact.
Well, yeah, already a prediction, of course, that the energy price cap may have to increase another further £1,000 to £3,000 a year, which literally will mean there are so many people in this country who are unable to heat their houses. Carol McGiffin, I know you're also quite sceptical.
I'm not denying any of that is happening. The issue I have with it all is that yesterday we were in a different crisis, and that ended this morning when this one started. And
which none of us need, right?
Well, no. I mean, you know, this morning we probably woke up and thought, oh, at least we can talk about, you know, other things now. And now I feel like I'm being a little bit manipulated into this is now the narrative. This is what we're going to talk about. And in whatever you say about it, it is happening. But it feels like another giant distraction from something else. And I do, you know, I am worried, a little bit worried about what's happening there. But at the same time, I feel like I've been lied to. We've all been lied to so much for the last 2 years that I don't know what the truth is. I haven't really formed a proper opinion about it yet because I haven't had time. You need to watch and wait. Yeah, I haven't had time to find the truth. You read forums, you read other articles, you read comment from people who are actually there and what is actually happening. And you think, maybe that's what's happening. And then you go to the mainstream media and you think, no, I'm being told this is what I have to think. So yeah, I'm kind of on the fence still a little bit. So I'm going to, you know, bide my time and see what happens. But something isn't right.
And sorry, could I just say quickly, you know, when Putin said that he is invading Ukraine because he wants to denazify it. Now, this was obviously a very extreme statement, but our media has just said, and our leaders have just said, he's flat out lying. When I've got an article here from 2018 that says that militias that countered Putin's annexation of Crimea in 2014, who used neo-Nazi symbolism and have actually integrated these neo-Nazis who use this insignia within Ukraine's military, That's all you need to say. But if people aren't trusting this because I don't feel as though we're getting the full...
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a neo-Nazi element in Ukraine, but it would be a very small minority element if you look across the population.
It's important to note that the president of Ukraine is a Jewish man.
But that doesn't take away from the fact that militia groups who help fight pro-Russian separatists, they have been integrated into the Ukraine's official army, and that's a fact that the BBC
and of course, Ukraine, in many ways, very corrupt society as well. But Amy Nicole, at the end of the day, we cannot have Putin threatening us with nuclear war. And I'm sorry, that's what he did at 5:55 a.m. this morning. Yeah. And to me, that's why appeasement doesn't work, because he's making a threat of nuclear war.
Yeah, currently appeasement really isn't working, is it, unfortunately? But I think what we've seen there from those two fantastic interviews you just did is that the situation in Kyiv is really unfolding to be something quite terrifying and quite ugly. My concern with the sanctions is that it'll also make victims of the Russian population. So those are innocent people as well. So putting sanctions economically on a population of people, just I don't know whether it's going to work. And also, we forget...
Many Russians, by the way, who are, for the first time, standing up against this. They don't want this. And actually, if you look at certain opinion polling, Putin, very unpopular in Russia at the moment. But perhaps he sees a war as his ticket to increased popularity. Look, we're going to have the superstar panel here all night. Lots to analyse. That is Amy Nicole, Dominic Samuels, Karen Gifford. Thank you so much. But coming up, after condemning Putin for choosing a path of bloodshed in Ukraine, what action can Boris Johnson take next? Anne Widdecombe has a bold answer which she'll reveal shortly. But up next in The Clash, after Boris seemed to suggest that military intervention is on the table, should we send British troops to Ukraine? Top strategic and military minds debate that straight after the break. But let me know what you think. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me @gbnews, and we've got a poll running there now.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Any wintry showers and strong winds tend to ease gradually overnight, leaving icy patches in their wake, but a drier and sunnier day is expected on Friday. There'll be some clear spells in the south and the east through the night, but during the evening, further rain, sleet and hill snow showers could cause issues for northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. As they fade away during the hours of darkness, they leave behind some slippery surfaces, some icy patches to wake up to on Friday. 0 to 1 Celsius for Scotland and Northern England, 2 to 4 for Northern Ireland, England and Wales. But Friday itself sees high pressure towards the southwest of the UK build across the country, and as a result, the wind finally eases and those showers also ease. There'll still be 1 or 2 around first thing, southwest Scotland, northwest England, into the Midlands. Otherwise, plenty of sunny spells, and that sunshine becomes widespread by the afternoon. Up and down the country, it's looking dry for a few hours, and with those sunny spells with lighter winds, it will feel pleasant. Temperatures reaching 10 Celsius in the south, 8 or 9 for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for Scotland, it turns cloudy by the end of the afternoon, as well as Northern Ireland. Outbreaks of rain move through here. Generally, it's light on and off rain, and that continues into the evening and overnight. As we start off the weekend, we'll see clear spells for England and Wales, cloudier conditions for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's where the strongest breeze will be, and so frost-free, 6 or 7 degrees for Scotland and Northern Ireland first thing Saturday. It's looking closer to 0 for much of central and eastern England, where there will be a frost around, but plenty of bright skies. And actually for England and Wales, for parts of southern and eastern Scotland, a bright and dry day is expected. But for western Scotland, for Northern Ireland, it's windy. It's also cloudy, and there'll be some spots of rain with gales in exposed spots. Sunday sees rain move in from the west, but that dissipates by the afternoon.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Anne Widdecombe and Mark Dolan on the way, but time now for The Clash. Breaking tonight, the UN's refugee agency has warned of a rapidly deteriorating situation in Ukraine as people flee the Russian invasion. The US has joined the UK in hitting Russia with devastating sanctions after Boris Johnson announced the largest and most severe package ever imposed by the government. 100 businesses and individuals will be targeted. Russia's state-run airline will be banned from landing in Britain, and assets of all major Russian banks will be frozen. Boris set out details in Parliament after he addressed the nation on TV earlier to condemn the blood-stained aggressor Vladimir Putin. And despite the West's reluctance to put boots on the ground in Ukraine, the PM seemingly left nothing off the table.
Diplomatically, politically, economically, and eventually militarily, this hideous and barbaric venture of Vladimir Putin must end in failure.
So, should the UK send British troops into Ukraine? Controversial question. Email me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. You can vote in my poll there too. But to debate this first, I'm joined by the Conservative MP, Alicia Cairns, former Army, Infantry and Intelligence Officer Henry Bolton, OBE, and former senior British military advisor to US Central Command, Major General Chip Chapman. Alicia, do you think the Prime Minister was hinting there that there is the possibility that British troops could be on the ground at some point in this conflict?
I have to say, I don't think that's what his intention was to say, but I think it was incredibly vague and therefore we could have taken it either way. But I think we have to remember that every public statement he makes is part of the chess game that we're playing with Putin. And so it's very important that we don't necessarily shut down avenues too early for fear of what that would tell Putin that we are willing or not willing to do.
And Henry Bolton, you think troops on the ground could be potential?
I think what we've got to keep in mind is not just what we do, it's why we're doing it. And we cannot allow Putin to succeed here. He and the Russian army and Russia cannot gain a benefit from this action. And if it looks as though that's going to be the case, I would say that we need to enforce a no-fly zone, at least to the west of the River Dnieper, which is the big sort of blue mark. Anybody can see it on a map of Ukraine, pretty much down the centre of it. And if necessary, as well, put a NATO armoured division or a couple of brigades in the far west of the country as a sign that we are not going to let Putin succeed here. We need to bolster the Ukrainian army. It's for the Ukrainians to do the fighting. But if we need to give them that edge on the battlefield, then we need to look seriously at how we do it. Because Putin will have factored in the sanctions, 100% he will, the worst case sanctions for Russia. And he has decided, having looked at that worst case scenario, that he is prepared to deal with that. He can take that on. And so our sanctions are not going to stop what's happening. And it's happening quite quickly. We must make sure he doesn't succeed.
Major General Chip Chapman, you don't think it's likely that British troops will be engaged?
Well, your answer at the macro level came today, but from our the biggest alliance partner. So Adam Schiff in the House Intelligence Committee today said that I don't think there's a situation where we'll ever see American boots on the ground. If Americans say that, we're likely to follow their lead at the moment. So the answer to that is no. But what we are doing, we're at the moment doing Iron Surge, which is the armoured battle group which has just been trained in Germany, because my son was there with them, and is moving as we speak to reinforce the Estonian Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group. Really, we've got the containment line now, which is going to run from the intermaritime countries, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, and that is where the stop line will be. It might be that we might do things later on to put things on the ground, but at the moment, the case for that is niet. I think more likely, and what was really interesting today and what happened in Moscow, is asking some Muscovites last week if there would be a war and Russia would invade Ukraine. The answer was Kanishna niet. Of course not, stupid, is that line. They couldn't believe that because of what they'd been fed by Putin. So I think the collapse internally of Russia, Putin's position, if this doesn't go well, is more of a gamble for him than a risk in the long term if there is a war after the war from the Ukrainians. And of course, it is not, as I keep saying, armies that fight wars, it's nations that fight wars. And as long as the political polity is there and there's the will of the Ukrainian people to fight, then they have a chance.
Alessia, you think air support should be considered?
I do, because I think nothing should be off the table. The difficulty for me is, and I don't know if the two gentlemen agree with me, but when you come from a past where you're used to having intelligence to hand, I'm not inclined to say for definite that we should be putting in place a no-fly zone, because I don't have the intelligence to prove it to be effective. But also, like Chip, I'm not convinced that we're ready to put British troops at risk.
No.
And we would have to deploy air support solely if we were happy that Russian, essentially they would shoot down British airmen and airwomen. And I'm not convinced that's something we're happy to do. And I think also if we were to do it, we would have to do it with all our NATO allies. This is not something you do on your own. And again, I'm absolutely just not certain that we would have that support from our NATO allies to go in and maintain a no-fly zone.
And Alessia, are you hearing much from your constituents on this? Because most folk who I speak to seem to be steadfast that they don't want the government to risk British lives.
So I have to say, constituents haven't really mentioned specifically whether they don't want British troops to go in, but they have been absolutely resolute that they want a strong response. They've been absolutely behind economic sanctions. And I think I've obviously been particularly forward-leaning in terms of saying that if we don't see sanctions result in behaviour change from Putin, I want to see offensive cyber strikes deployed, and I want to see further escalations from that point onwards. And what has been incredibly clear was that constituents have given me their full backing to deploy the full hybrid arsenal that we have to hand.
Henry Bolton, how did we get here in the first place? What is it about the West's actions since 2014 that gave Putin the confidence to act in this manner?
Well, that's a complex answer to your quite simple question, Dan. You know, there's a history to this. It's all about the character and the perceptions and the worldview, if you like, of the Russian people, the Russian government, Putin himself, and all of that. And one has to understand that. I don't think particularly the European Union has been very good at understanding that and appreciating that the Russian government does have a different worldview. But at the end of the day here, however naive and however badly we've handled this over months or years, there is absolutely no justification whatsoever for the Russian army to be going into Ukraine. Absolutely none. There were other solutions. Even if Putin, even hypothetically, if we said that Putin had a case in terms of something going on in the Donbass, in Donetsk and Luhansk, there were other mechanisms that Russia is part of that could have been employed to solve that problem. He has not wanted to. This is not about anything like that. This is about Putin wanting his own sort of doctrine and his own sort of almost religious ideology that Russia or Ukraine should never have left the Russian fold, if you like. And he doesn't want a successful sort of democratic economy of Slavs who are very, very closely related to the Russians on his doorstep, because then the Russians will look at that. I mean, one of the things about Russia and Ukraine is that they are very, very close. There are people who are living in Russia who've got one or other parent who was born in Ukraine. They're very, very close. And if Ukraine was booming and Russia's not, it's going to look very bad for Putin. So there's a whole lot there. But I cannot accept that there is any justification, however naive and however badly things have been handled, going back to way before 2014 and the Maidan. There was a lot of naivety, and I think there still is a lack of understanding of the Russian people and the Russian sort of government's mentality that has contributed towards all of this. But there is absolutely, we've got to be very, very clear on that. There are lessons to be learned, but there is no justification whatsoever. That doesn't justify Putin going in and doing what he's done now.
Well, no.
Absolutely not.
And
He's
also
visiting extreme violence on the Ukrainians and harming his own nation.
Indeed.
He cannot be forgiven for that.
Major General Chip Chapman, whatever you think about the mistakes we've made over the past few years, and of course we've made mistakes in our dealings with Russia, it was chilling to hear Putin threaten nuclear war at 5:55 a.m. Moscow time this morning. Do you think he's lost the plot, or do you think these are threats?
Well, firstly, I don't think he threatened nuclear war. What I think people have done, commentators, is had their minds hacked. He didn't say that at all. But of course, that's people go to the maximalist position, so we need to put that in context. There are two parts, I think, of the multi-domain operations which could be escalatory and which we and they could use. The first one is we don't know what would occur in cyberspace should we go to what he might think or we might think is a NATO Article 5, particularly if you sort of degrade, deny, and then destroy, which is possible in cyber. And Jeremy Fleming said that in his Singapore speech in February 19. And the other one, of course, is that we will continue to give intelligence to Ukraine, not from air breathers, that's the intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance aircraft, which have been circling day after day in massive numbers over the last few weeks, which have laid down the sort of order of battle of Russia, but from satellites. So there is a theory that the Russians, for example, because of that interference, might either dazzle, jam, or ultimately destroy American satellites. That would lead space debris and all that. Both of those things, the cyber and interference in space, because land, sea, and air operations are not the only three domains that we talk about now, could actually lead to an Article 5 operation. But Article 5, of course, is any time that the politicians say it is.
OK. Fascinating insight from all of you. That's Major General Chip Chapman, former senior British military advisor to US Central Command, who also served in Russia in 1993. Before that, the Conservative MP Alessia Cairns and the former Army Infantry and Intelligence Officer Henry Bolton, OBE. Thank you all. So who do you agree with? Well, Charlie on Twitter says, not at all. It would be shameful to send UK troops into a war that could lead to nuclear altercation, especially when we have a very checkered history with our own foreign policy. From Mary on email, yes, I think we should send our soldiers in. It's absolutely disgusting that we are not helping them. If Putin can break the law, then I believe we have the right to go in. And from Tony on Twitter, not yet. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. We are giving what we can. If Putin invades a NATO member, then we have World War III. And your verdict is now in. 24% of you, so a quarter, think that the UK should send troops to Ukraine, while 76% of you say that we should not. And I have to be honest, right now, I'm with the majority on this. Absolutely no need for us to send troops, although we have to leave the option on the table. That is all I would say, because otherwise Putin is going to continue to take advantage of us. Coming up, with war erupting in Europe, will the West finally stop its obsession with wokeism and get serious about real threats to our existence? Mark Dolan breaks that down in The Outsider at 9:45. And should the UK pull the trigger on more crippling sanctions for Russia in a bid to end the crisis in Europe? Political firebrand and former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe is adamant it's the only route to peace. She's here straight after the break. GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Breaking tonight as the first refugees from Ukraine arrive in neighbouring Poland after the UN reports 100,000 people have fled their homes. It's critical that Western leaders act now to avoid a humanitarian disaster and return peace to Europe. Promising to see our political leaders stepping up to the plate. I mean, I don't usually have anything good to say about Keir Starmer, neither does my guest tonight, former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe, but the Labour leader wasted no time in joining Boris Johnson in verbally eviscerating Putin. A marked departure, of course, from the party's former leader, the Putin apologist Jeremy Corbyn, who has spent the last week claiming NATO is the aggressor, not Russia.
He seeks division, so we must stay united. He hopes for inaction, so we must take a stand. He believes that we're too corrupted to do the right thing, so we must prove him wrong. I believe we can, but only if we stand together.
Starmer pretending to be Prime Minister there, but it's of course Boris who will be making all the critical decisions. So what can the PM do to stop Putin? Anne Widdecombe has some suggestions. And great to see you. What do you think Boris Johnson should be doing here?
Well, first of all, I think military aid as opposed to boots on the ground is absolutely essential. And there should be a really concerted attempt on the part of, you might call it a Western alliance, because Ukraine isn't part of NATO, can't invoke Article 5. But there should be now a concerted international attempt to get military aid into Ukraine, even if we don't put boots on the ground. That's the first thing. The second thing is those sorts of opinion polls that show only a minority in favour of boots on the ground actually give aid and comfort to Putin. Just remember Adolf Hitler in 1939, who believed that because a few years earlier the Oxford Union had passed a motion saying this House would not fight for king or country, that there was a disinclination on the part of Britain to fight. We mustn't let that get across. But in the end, what can we do? Well, the only power we've really got is sanctions. And I also very rarely say anything in Keir Starmer's favour. But I thought he hit the nail on the head a couple of days ago when Boris announced this very impressive packet of sanctions. And Keir Starmer said, yes, but when? And that's what we've got to do. It's no good talking, we've got to go into action. And we also have to accept that if we have very strict, rigidly policed sanctions against Russia, and I hope we do, but if that's what we're going to do, then it will also impact on us. We may not have boots on the ground, but don't get the idea that any Western nation is going to be unaffected by what's going on.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that people are so worried about this. And I think there's certainly a feeling out there in some quarters that perhaps the West has been unnecessarily provocative towards Putin. And you can understand, can't you, when we're facing a cost of living crisis, we're completely reliant on Russian energy, and we're talking about potential bills of £3,000 a year for a British household as a result of this conflict.
Well, the fact is there's more at stake than our fuel bills. And we really do have to grit our teeth and impose those sanctions. And Germany's had the guts to cancel its second pipeline, and it's very dependent on Russian gas. So I think we've all got to find our courage in this. And yes, of course, people will worry. Of course they will. You know, this is an international military situation. Of course they will worry. But can I just say there's one worry I don't think they need to have, and that's the nuclear worry. I think he retains enough rationality not to start unleashing nukes, because he knows that if he did that, the United States would fight back. Not worth it. That's Armageddon. Not worth it. Nobody benefits.
Anne Whittaker, sage analysis as ever. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We'll speak again next week. Now, coming up, as Trump is lauded for calling out the danger of NATO members' reliance on Russia in 2018, is the Donald right to say that Putin would never have invaded Ukraine during his presidency? Also, with war erupting in Europe, will the West finally stop its obsession with wokeism and start getting real about the proper threats to our existence rather than things like pronouns? GB News star Mark Dolan breaks that down as The Outsider next.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Mark Dolan is tonight's outsider. And breaking tonight, Ukraine has suffered 203 attacks carried out by Russian forces, prompting the ambassador to the UK to call for NATO to impose a no-fly zone over his country. And reacting to today's events, people are quite rightly questioning how the West allowed the conflict to reach this point. While our Prime Minister showed his Churchill spirit, Presidents Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron have lost any remaining credibility on the world stage following their feeble approaches to fending off Putin. But weakness from the West has become endemic, with many politicians surrendering their principles and better judgment to the woke mob. This tweet from the leader of the Reclaim Party, Lawrence Fox, sums it up perfectly. He wrote, "This tragedy should be about a wake-up call to the West, the weak wet, woke, penance, kneeling, diversity, equity and inclusion obsessing, critical race theory loving, pronoun pronouncing, net zero fanatics who promote victimhood as bravery. This emboldens your adversaries. And as I say in my new Mail Online column tonight, Russia and China have laughed at us as we became obsessed with woke issues like the Black Lives Matter movement, the March to Net Zero and the use of gender pronouns. Well, Mark, with war now in Europe, do you think it's time we stop getting distracted by wokery, man up and get serious, because there's far greater horrors than being a little bit offended to contend with?
Well, Dan, I think we're more than distracted. I think we're in the process of handing over the free world to China, because be clear that this war isn't about Russia, which is a minor world economy. It's all about China. But really, they've won without a single bullet being fired, notwithstanding the current conflict in Ukraine. The West has gone soft, Dan. We are obsessing over pronouns, as you mentioned, and statues, desecrating and apologizing for our own glorious history, pursuing a ruinous net zero policy on carbon, which of course enriches countries like Russia, upon whom we are so dependent, certainly in Europe, particularly Germany, for gas. Don't get me started on the pandemic response, because that has been another triumph for China. Western countries have enfeebled themselves financially, and now we face a very tangible threat, not from a virus, but from bad actors like Russia, other rogue nations. Don't forget, terrorism hasn't gone away, Islamic extremism, and most of all, China. I mean, let me quote to you this amazing journalist and writer in America, Michael P. Singer, who's written a book about President Xi. And he writes down, over 2 years, the US squandered $16 trillion on its war on COVID, as coddled elites believed their world so secure they could afford these theatrics for a virus with a low IFR, which of course is an infection fatality rate, exhausting all our emergency funds and creating a vacuum into which barbarism has stepped. And here we are.
Of course. And you're completely right to say this is not just about Russia, because imagine what Xi Jinping is thinking tonight, Mark. Imagine what he's fantasizing about in terms of Taiwan and his sick little mind.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's salivating over taking Taiwan. That will happen in the near future, because the West has retreated, because we're just obsessed with ourselves. I think we've had plenty for too long, and we've taken our eye off the boil, off the ball. And, you know, in the end, we will pay a human price, an economic price, a quality of life price. I mean, this war is going to have a huge impact on the cost of living in this country, and we really are reaping what we've sowed for too long by being too weak, too soft and too self-indulgent.
Mark Dolan, who will continue coverage of this story at 9 o'clock on GB News tomorrow night. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton, and breaking tonight. Ukrainian troops are bravely defending their nation against the Russian aggressors and have recaptured an airfield in the northwest suburbs of Kyiv. We'll get more insight into the situation live on the ground in the next hour. Mesa Gifford, the Brit who fought against ISIS in Syria but has now witnessed an airstrike on European soil for the first time, joins me live as he joins the thousands of others desperately trying to free Kyiv. Then one of Putin's most outspoken opponents and Russia's greatest libertarian voice, jailed and exiled political heavyweight Mikhail Svetov, joins me to give the Russian political perspective. As President Biden is condemned for smirking during a press conference about the invasion, which has so far claimed over 57 lives, has weak leadership in the White House enabled Putin's bloody aggression? The associate editor of The Spectator, author of The Madness of Crowds, Douglas Murray, tackles the spineless presidency that's paved the way for Putin's tanks in Uncancelled at 10:40. With peace across the continent and border in jeopardy, why are Britain's spy chiefs now being told to go woke? Also, Russian police have brutally cracked down on anti-war protests that have erupted all over the country, and there's been some significant high-profile dissent too. Plus, as Trump is lauded for calling out the danger of NATO members' reliance on Russia in 2018.
Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened.
Is the Donald right to say that Putin would never have invaded Ukraine during his presidency? I'll put that to my superstar panel shortly and give you the first look at how tomorrow's newspapers are covering the crisis in the media buzz. Plus, as usual, before the hour is out, I'll reveal today's greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But before all that, the news headlines at 10 with Miranda Shunka.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening. The top stories this hour. The head of MI6 says the Russian invasion of Ukraine was a long-planned and unprovoked aggression. Richard Moore, known in Whitehall as C, was speaking after Ukraine's port city of Mariupol suffered heavy fire and the Chernobyl nuclear plant was captured, allowing Russian forces to advance closer to the capital, Kyiv. Ukraine says 57 people have been killed and 169 were wounded today. Some people are also taking shelter in subways in fear of potential further bombardment overnight. Boris Johnson has announced the UK is imposing the largest and most severe package of economic sanctions Russia has ever seen.
We will continue on a remorseless mission to squeeze Russia from the global economy piece by piece, day by day and week by week. And we will, of course, use Britain's position in every international forum to condemn the onslaught against Ukraine, and we will counter the Kremlin's blizzard of lies and disinformation by telling the truth about Putin's war of choice and his war of aggression.
Well, the Prime Minister also rejected President Vladimir Putin's claim that Russia was left with no choice but to take military action.
I'm driven to conclude that Putin was always determined to attack his neighbour, no matter what we did. Now we see him for what he is, a blood-stained aggressor who believes in imperial conquest.
Well, meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has held a call with the Russian leader this evening, demanding an immediate end to the military operations in Ukraine. The call was Macron's initiative and took place after he consulted with Ukraine's president. The Kremlin says that President Putin gave him an exhaustive explanation of the reasons for the invasion and that the two leaders have agreed to maintain a dialogue. The US is also ramping up sanctions against Russia, as well as taking action against 24 Belarusian individuals and entities for supporting Moscow's invasion. President Biden says Kremlin claims it reacted after being threatened by Ukraine and NATO are completely unfounded.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time.
Well, online, on TV and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now let's get straight back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. And let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages hot off the press. The bloodshed begins, says The Independent. This is going to be one of those iconic photos that people remember for years. It reports dozens of people are either dead or injured after Putin's assault on Ukraine. It says Russian forces have taken control of the Chernobyl nuclear plant too after heavy fighting. The Metro's headline, War in Europe, and of course also features that Ukrainian woman who was wounded in an airstrike. But it compares to, and I like this comparison, Russia's President Vladimir Putin to the Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler. Ukraine has begged the world to come to its aid after Russia invaded and plunged Europe into war. The paper reports at least 10 civilians were killed in the first airstrikes, including a small boy in a apartment block. We know it's now 57 who have been killed thus far, officially confirmed by the Ukrainian Health Department. My superstar panel are back with me now. The political commentator and writer Dominique Samuels, the columnist and media personality Carol McGiffin, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Now, could Donald Trump have been the linchpin of peace in Europe? The former president claimed in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that Putin never would have dared attack its neighbour during his time in the White House.
This is something that should have never happened. This would not have happened during my administration. In fact, some people were saying, why didn't this take place over the last 4 years during our administration? And it didn't, for a very good reason, and I'll explain that to you someday. But it wouldn't have taken place, and it wouldn't have taken place right now. And it's a very sad thing for the world, for the country, and it's certainly very sad for a lot of people that are going to be needlessly killed. I really don't believe he wanted to do this initially. I think he wanted to do something and negotiate, and it just got worse and worse. And then he saw the weakness. And, you know, it really started, I think, with the weakness in Afghanistan, the way they pulled out of Afghanistan. I really believe that's where he started thinking, you know, he can do this.
Well, he's certainly got a point there, doesn't he? Donald had come under fire, of course, for praising Putin as a genius and pretty savvy in the hours before the invasion, as well as calling Russia's strategic recognition of separatist states wonderful. But whether you think he was right or wrong there, you have to admit he's got a point about being the only Western leader who stood a chance of keeping Putin in his box. Don't you agree, Carol McGiffin? I genuinely don't believe Putin would have done it if Trump were in the White House.
I agree. I absolutely don't think this would be happening now if Trump was still in power. I mean, there wasn't a single conflict, a single war, nothing while he was under his reign.
And there was during the Obama presidency with Crimea.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And historically, I think the Democrats have always not caused but started more wars, for sure. They have, and you know, I don't know where people get this from, that, you know, Trump's the big troublemaker. He made friends with Kim Jong-un, for crying out loud. You know, if someone can make friends with him, then surely, I mean, he was quite close to Putin.
I think there's making friends and then there's being treated as a puppet and thinking you're their friend.
No,
that's not true.
No,
If
that's
anything,
not the point.
Biden is the puppet. Sleepy Joe's the puppet. I mean, he's just a mess.
Yeah,
Afghanistan.
Useless.
Afghanistan first, botched Afghanistan operation, something that Trump would have never done.
No.
Second thing, agreeing to Nord Stream 2. His own party, people in his own party and the Republican Party were protesting against this because it was an absolutely ridiculous decision. Putin has obviously smelt blood and absolutely gone for it because Sleepy Joe doesn't have a clue he's doing.
Amy, I'll come back to you in 1 second, but just because you've mentioned Nord Stream 2, I really want to play this clip from 2018, because folk who say Trump didn't know what he was talking about when it came to NATO and Germany and Russia should just have a look at this and eat their words.
I think it's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries, and then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia, where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? I mean, I've been complaining about this from the time I got in. It should have never been allowed to have happened.
He was right, Dominique.
He said it. He predicts things and people don't want to hear it. You know, if Joe Biden was really serious about solving this crisis, he wouldn't be putting together a pathetic package of sanctions. He'd be reopening the Keystone Pipeline.
Sanctions that harm his own people.
His own people, scrap the silly green agenda and start saying, hello, Europeans, we're going to sell you our gas, rather than allowing Putin to basically run into the arms of China, by the way, sell his gas to them and really not be impacted in any sort of way, short term or long term, really.
Amy Nicole, you disagree. Go
I
on.
completely disagree, because I don't think two lunatics are better than one. Although what they do have in common is Putin and Trump are both completely detached from reality. And I think the key thing here is what's happened today proves that Vladimir Putin is completely detached from reality in the fact that he has tunnel visioned that Ukraine belongs to Russia. He believes that they are one state and they should be, and nothing at all is going to stop that. And nothing that any other...
That's not the only reason why. This is part.
But Dominic, you must concede that is a huge issue, because if Putin essentially wants to use Ukraine to start rebuilding the Soviet Union, then nothing will stop him, because it is almost, I would say it's a deranged belief, but it's almost a religion to him.
Completely in his own history.
I might sound like a traitor here, but I genuinely don't believe his concerns are really unfounded. Of course, I agree with his historical claim to Ukraine and Russia, they need to be united. But at the same time, he's always been concerned about NATO expansionism in Eastern Europe. And we've seen that. We've seen it in Poland, we've seen it in Romania, we even saw suggestions of moving American nukes to Poland, right near Russia. Russia feels as though it's being surrounded. Peter Hitchens said the same thing. I don't think his protestations are entirely unreasonable. So unless we're prepared to sort out the energy problem and get rid of the green agenda, we need to get back to the table and start talking
But Carol,
again.
when it comes to nukes, though, you have to feel huge sympathy for the Ukrainians who did this deal with Russia, post-Soviet Union, to hand back all of their nukes under the promise that they were allies forever. So they have been terribly let down.
Well, the thing is, Dan, it is what do you actually believe? Where do you think all this comes from? You know, who's telling who what? Dominic's absolutely right. I understand that Russia are concerned about, you know, the encroachment of NATO, the border, you know, NATO getting closer to their border with American nukes, because American nukes could have been
But my view on that,
positioned there.
because I was discussing this last week with Nigel Farage, and my view on that is that it is a complete delusional fantasy, given the state of mind that Putin is in, think that we could have just said, oh, yeah, don't worry, the Ukraine, they're never going to join NATO. And Putin would have said, oh, fine, I'm just going to back off. I'm just going to take away this lifelong passion that I have to rebuild the Soviet Union. It wouldn't have been enough, Carol.
When has he ever said that? How do we know that he has a lifelong passion to it? Because a couple of journalists say it, right? And why is everyone talking about Putin's state of mind when, you know, you've got other leaders around the country, these hypocrites
Well, I think Biden and
around
Putin
the
are
world.
both senile.
No, I mean, yeah, of course, but around the world, acting in a really anti-democratic way, and have been for the last 2 years, and nobody seems to care about that. It's almost like you're being told to forget about that bit. That's over now. Let's all concentrate on Putin. Putin's the bad man.
There was the irony earlier in the week, wasn't there, with Trudeau talking about authoritarianism.
But I'm not saying he's a good man. I'm not saying that. But when you look at international relations, we cannot afford an out-and-out war with Russia. That's why we won't be sending our troops to the Ukraine, because it's not a NATO member.
But appeasement hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked. So unless you want to get rid of the green agenda
Russia has weighed up before Putin's gone into this situation.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Well, I think they have weighed it up and they've seen our weakness.
Well, yeah, precisely. What more can we do at this point?
Well, we could start by actually listening to Putin's concerns with regards to NATO expansionism. I know people don't want to talk about that, but NATO has been expanding since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and that's
I just don't think it would have been enough. I genuinely think we could have pledged, NATO could have pledged, Ukraine will forever stay out of the organisation. I genuinely don't think it would have been enough. But look, on a dark day for Europe and the world, there has been an emotional and widespread outpouring of Russian opposition. I'm fascinated by this. to Putin's bloody and unprovoked attack on Ukraine. Rare protests against the Russian president broke out in cities all over the country as Russians made moving pleas to Putin for peace. Groups of protesters in Moscow, St. Petersburg and Ekaterinburg showed solidarity with Ukraine and chanted no to war. But Putin's police were swift to crack down on the protests, which are rare and, of course, illegal in the authoritarian country. Early today, the government warned Russians of legal repercussions for joining unsanctioned protests related to the tense foreign political situation. Russian officers have so far detained over 1,700 people during anti-war protests in 40 cities across the country on Thursday. That's according to the OVD Info Protest Monitor. Now, the appetite for war among high-profile Russians also appears to be low, as several celebrities bravely spoke out on social media despite the risks of ruthless consequences for their dissent. Late-night talk show host and actor Ivan Urgan posted "Fear and pain, no to war." Comedian Maxim Galkin, singer and husband of Alla Pugacheva, Russia's biggest celebrity, said, "I've been talking to friends and relatives from Ukraine since early morning. I can't find the words to say what I feel. How can this be possible? There can be no justification for war. No to war." And pop star Meiladze posted a video saying, "Today something happened that could and should never have happened. History will judge everything one day. Now I want to beg you to stop military action and sit down to negotiate." This is completely bizarre, by the way. American Oscar-winning actor Sean Penn has been pictured at the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's press conference after he flew to Kyiv to film a documentary with Vice. Zelensky posted a video of their meeting on his Instagram account. Their conversation was muted, so there was no sound, but Zelensky wrote in a caption, "The more people know about the war in Ukraine, the higher the likelihood of stopping Russia." Am I living in some weird sort of Hollywood blockbuster? This is just odd. Carol McGiffin says yes. Dominic Samuels, Amy Nicole, thank you so much. Do stand by, because coming up, with peace in Europe and beyond in jeopardy, why are Britain's spy chiefs now being told to go woke, to not use the word strong? It's ridiculous. We'll debate that MI5 and MI6 madness in the media buzz shortly, plus bringing more of those Ukraine front pages hot off the press. But next, we'll get vital insight from Ukrainian and Russian citizens into this terrifying crisis. First, we'll hear from one of Putin's most outspoken opponents and Russia's greatest libertarian voice, the jailed and exiled political heavyweight Mikhail Svetov. Then Mesa Gifford, the brave Brit who traded in his entire life to fight against ISIS in Syria, tells of his horror at witnessing an airstrike for the first time on European soil. He'll join me from Kyiv as he attempts to escape the city next.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Breaking tonight, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant has been captured by Russian forces, the Ukrainian Prime Minister has confirmed. Putin's forces have taken control of the infamous facility near Pripyat, around 60 miles from the capital Kyiv, following fierce clashes with government forces. A Russian security source told the Reuters news agency that Putin wants to control the reactor to signal NATO not to interfere militarily. Someone who is familiar with Putin's tyranny is Mikhail Svetov, one of his most outspoken opponents and Russia's greatest libertarian voice. Mikhail was forced to flee his home country after he was arrested and jailed for organising unauthorised free speech rallies. And while they're different ideologically, Mikhail continues himself an ally of Russia's jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny. And Mikhail joins me now from Panama. Mikhail, great to have you here. Obviously, you will be aware that there have been many protests on the streets of Russia tonight, with hundreds and hundreds of arrests. But this must give you great pleasure to see.
Yeah, not only a lot of people flooded the streets, but also a lot of members of Libertarian Party of Russia are actually taking a stance and going against the war, because this is not the cause that any reasonable thinking Russian supports. The war is hugely unpopular in Russia, and even though people are scared to voice their dissent, you can get the idea of what they're thinking by talking to them and by seeing them taking to the streets, because we haven't seen that since the big crackdown on the opposition a year ago. So that was a very pleasant sight to see, but unfortunately, I'm afraid that there will be a very dire repercussions for those who are arrested right now.
Well, of course, because protests are illegal, as you well know, Mikhail. But tell me, what is the mood towards Putin in Russia at the moment?
I think admiration was replaced by fear. Basically, Putin is feared on the outside of Russia as well as inside of Russia. People think that he's capable of anything, and he pretty much proved that he's capable of anything by giving this crazy speech this morning. I'm sure you talked about it already, where he basically threatened the West with using nuclear weapons. Just listening to it gave me chills. I actually felt like I was watching a movie, like it was a Dr. Strangelove or something. So it's chilling, and it's a new Putin. We haven't seen Putin quite like this before. Before, we felt that he was a rational actor. He was a bully, he was a thug, but he was rational. What we saw this morning with this outright war against Ukraine is that he ceased to be rational, and he's now possessed by this idea that he's a savior, or that he has a mission has been put to earth to advance this mission of, collecting Russian lands and collecting Russian people. It's a different president than he was 10 years ago.
Exact reading of the speech as well, to be honest, and I'm not scaremongering, I just found it completely terrifying. I mean, Mikhail, from your point of view, do you think that this overreach could end up being a good thing, because it might cause the downfall of Putin? Oh, we've lost your audio, but that was Russian politician. Oh, we've got you back. No, that was Russian politician and activist. Sorry to lose you there, Mikhail Svetov. Thank you very much for that unique insight. Now, British human rights activist Mesa Gifford is currently on the ground in Kyiv, but is desperately trying to find a way out of the besieged Ukrainian capital as Putin's tanks close in. He sent this update from the central train station earlier, where many thousands are also attempting to escape, and others have been sheltering with their families on the underground transport network.
and this is the train station for people trying to get out of the city. You can see how busy it is. People are queuing up and sleeping in the station.
So, Mesa, there was certainly a sense of calm in those shots. How are people coping in Kyiv today?
Well, the city, there's been a disconnect between life in the city over the last few days and what the British and American intelligence has been telling the world for a while now. I don't think people actually believed they were going to come under attack. People were going to the shops, they were going to restaurants, life was going on. Yet the shadow was sort of looming over them. And it's only in the last, obviously, let's say 24 hours, that the grim reality of total war has descended. And there's fear, the shops are filling up, ATMs the queues are forming, and we've seen a real rush to the roads and to the train stations. So it's, but there's also a blitz-like spirit as well. Don't get me wrong, there are Ukrainians out there who are rushing to join the local forces and also hunkering down for a hard few months ahead.
Mesa Gifford, we're just taking a look at this live shot of Kyiv tonight. Are you aware of any more explosions or missiles in the past few hours?
I haven't heard any here, but I'm in a safe place in the south of the city. Just this morning, I heard a number of explosions. I was on the street when a Russian cruise missile passed overhead. I mean, it's scary because there are women and children obviously still in the city. People are scared that as we speak, possibly tens of thousands of Russian troops will completely encircle the city. In the last few hours, there has been a Ukrainian counterattack. We do know that. A key airport north of here was taken back from the Russians, which may have bought Kyiv a bit more time. But I think people are used to the fact, or at least coming to the firm conclusion that really the end game is nigh, that Russia will inevitably take the city. It's just about getting as many people out of the city as possible, including myself.
Well, indeed, because speculation that Russia could have control of Kyiv within 3 days, Mesa. I know you're trying to get out. Tell me, though, I mean, you're a very brave man. You went to Syria in 2015 to fight against ISIS. How do the two situations compare?
Well, it's tough to be on the other side of the might of the. Obviously, I was fighting against the Islamic State alongside the Americans. We had total air superiority. We were hitting them hard and hitting them everywhere. And it's very much the complete opposite in this case. I've been here working with local people. Those are humanitarians. Those are in the civil defense. These are citizens that are quickly joining the Ukrainian military. I've been interviewing them. I've been speaking to them. And I've even been doing some training with them, some medical classes as well, really to pass on a little bit of my knowledge that I've built up over the last few years with local people. But the message I keep getting from every politician I meet to every military man I meet is the same, that Ukraine is not going to surrender. They're going to fight back, that Putin is a tyrant that wants to bend Ukraine to his will. And it's a real honor for me to spend the next few days working with the people here. And the moment a window of opportunity for me to get out and get to the western part of Ukraine, I'll be taking it, because I think the encirclement of the city will happen pretty quickly.
Mesa Gifford, your living history. Do keep in touch with us, and good luck. Get out of Kyiv safe. Coming up, did the weak actions of Biden and Harris empower deranged Putin to launch his offensive on Ukraine? The madness of Crowd's author Douglas Murray explores that in Uncancelled at 10:40. But next, why are British spies being urged to be more sensitive at a time when Europe is just going to war? My panel will debate that story in the Media Buzz. Plus, we'll review the newspapers on a dark day in recent history.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. More front pages have just been delivered. Ukraine's agony leads the eye after 57 die and 169 are wounded following Russia's invasion. Putin invades, that's the powerful headline on the front of The Guardian, as they're also running that harrowing photograph of a woman wounded in an airstrike that's graced many of the front pages. The publication also reports that energy bills, as I was mentioning earlier, could reach £3,000 a year due to the invasion. The Daily Telegraph headline reads, "New Cold War as Putin strikes," with Russian troops now closing in on the Ukrainian capital Kyiv in what is described on the front page as Europe's 9/11. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has declared that when it comes to defying Putin, the UK will lead by example. The Daily Mail reports Russian forces are closing in on Kyiv as Ukraine's leader warns a new Iron Curtain is descending on Europe. On one of Europe's darkest days since the Second World War, Vladimir Putin's troops launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine by land, air and sea, although they do say there is outrage as Germany and Italy veto tougher sanctions. The Daily Express leads with the powerful headline, "Redrawing the Map of Europe in Blood." The paper writes that the world gasped in horror as the blood-stained aggressor Putin launched a terrifying full-scale invasion. And the Daily Star, they do it their own way. They have transformed Putin into Hitler, actually. Sort of looks a bit like him, and asks, "Who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Putin?" My superstar panel back with me now. The columnist and media personality Carol McGiffin, the political commentator and writer Dominique Samuels, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Now, breaking tonight, the head of MI6, Richard Moore, has described Russia's invasion of Ukraine as long-planned, unprovoked, cruel aggression. But despite the blood being spilled by Putin in Europe's biggest political crisis since World War II, Britain's spies are being urged to act more sensitively. There was understandable outrage today after the Daily Mail revealed bosses at MI5 and MI6 have been sending how to be woke manuals to the country's top agents. The leaked document, titled Mission Critical, not a hint of irony there, has asked spies to consider their white privilege and declare their pronouns. Spies were also told to avoid using words like strong and grip because apparently they reinforce dominant cultural patterns. Give me strength. Or am I not allowed to say that either? Probably not. Now, this paper was written by National Security Advisor and woke cheerleader Sir Stephen Lovegrove, who has already received criticism for sending out messages with the hashtag of the Marxist Black Lives Matter movement. And in his forward, Sir Stephen said, this toolkit is called Mission Critical because a diverse and inclusive culture is critical to succeeding in our national security missions. I mean, Carol, you've got to admit, it's this sort of nonsense that is why China and Russia are laughing at the West.
Yeah, and I was laughing at you saying, give me strength, because you literally read my mind. When you were reading that, I was thinking, oh, God, give me strength. I mean, you're right. I mean, the fact that they're obsessing about things like this, it just makes us look pathetic. You know, just like, oh, you can't stand strong on the world stage if all you're worried about is your bloody pronouns, or you know, whether or not you've got white privilege, or you reconsider, you know, whether you should use certain words. I mean, I literally can't get my head around it. I can't.
And Dominic, this is infiltrating every aspect of Western civilization. I would really hope that the one area of our national life it kept the hell away from was the damn army. But it's not.
Oh, it's not safe. Nowhere is safe from, well, I think they use the word critical because it's part of a Marxist radical left-wing stream of thought that seeks to be critical of existing societal structures because it sees the way we live in our society as a source of, you know, oppression that just never ends. And this is the problem. We're focusing on extremely minute details in places where we really don't need to, forgetting that all people like, you know, Xi Jinping and Putin, the only things that they respect is power and strength, not pronouns. We're really losing a sense of reality here.
This is kind of funny, though, isn't it? That we've spent the whole day saying the West needs to show Putin that aggression does not pay. And yet you're just doing a whole segment on how aggression is irrelevant and we should all continue to push it. Like, do you see the irony?
Well, no, I think we need to have a strong military. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, it's not ironic. I don't want the MI5 and MI6 spies thinking about anything other than protecting us.
Okay, so diversity and inclusion has been proven to increase efficiency within the workforce. I think one workforce that could do with being pretty efficient is probably national security.
Just imagine if our armed forces have to start being namby-pamby about these sorts of things. You clearly have no idea of the reality of what it's like fighting in a war. You can't be thinking about, oh, I can't say strong, I'm going to offend this person because I'm calling him a he and he's a they. It's just a joke.
First of all, this was not called the woke manual, so that's just ridiculous.
Well, that's what it is.
The word woke was not even used as ever. So this is just stoking the non-existent culture war that we like to do from time to time. However, and understandably, the Daily Mail were outraged, because when are they not? Let's clutch our pearls about this one. But let's look at the serious repercussions of this. So one of the examples that they gave in this manual was an example of a Muslim employee saying that she was so happy that they did this diversity and inclusion workshop because she then could be excused from shaking hands with a man because it's not within her faith to do so. And that was...
How will that work when she's on a mission and she can't...
She's not on a mission. They're working in MI5, they're working in an office.
Well, yeah, but... Okay,
like,
fair enough.
This is a good thing that is happening. Let's not take it out of context. Let's see it for what it is, which is going towards a better and more efficient work.
Rubbish. I'm sorry. This is why the world is in trouble.
You are outraged.
Well, no, I just
You're
think...
more outraged about this than you were about actual Putin
it's a war on words.
being mad.
Oh, hardly, Amy. Hardly. What I am outraged about is the fact that this woke culture that Western civilization has become so obsessed with is allowing our enemies so much power over us because we are focusing on all the wrong rubbish. We have spent 2 years focusing on ridiculous COVID regulations, the Black Lives Matter movement, and now the trans movement, and that is not what's important right now in the world.
Think about it this way.
Whilst dismantling the military,
if the world,
more or less.
If the world really was a little more woke, then we wouldn't be in the situation we are today.
Yeah, but Amy, Putin's not going to be woke. Xi Jinping ain't going to be woke. That's the point. And this is who we're facing off against.
It would be a good thing if the world became more woke.
I don't think so, because it would be more segregation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, the reality is it's not going to happen, is it? But look, in the wake of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine today and a fiery debate over the channel's future on the show last night, the former Scottish First Minister Alex Salmond finally announced that he has suspended his talk show on the Kremlin-backed Putin-loving state broadcaster Russia Today. Salmond's episode this morning didn't devote any time to the bombs raining down in Europe and subsequent fears of World War III erupting. Instead, they thought an interview with the former Lib Dem leader, Sir Vince Cable, about his new book was more newsworthy.
Sir Vince Cable, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show. This new book, Money and Power, the 16 world leaders who changed economics. I suppose I've got two initial questions. One, how did you choose the 16 from the last 300 years? And secondly, virtually none of them were economists.
Now, let's be clear, Salmond hasn't quit the channel and is still on Moscow's payroll, but has opted out of presenting until peace is re-established. And that was only after mounting pressure from Westminster, with Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries demanding an Ofcom review into RT's licence. By the way, I think it's completely fine for Russia Today to keep broadcasting. I actually want it available right now because I think it's really important that we see what the Russian people are seeing, how the Russian government view this particular crisis. However, I think Alex Salmond should probably stop taking the Russian shilling. Carol McGiffin, Dominic Samuels, Amy Nicole, thank you so much. Do stand by, because coming up, it is the crowning moment of the show as we reveal today's greatest Britons and Union jackass. But next, as President Biden is condemned for smirking during a press conference about the invasion, which has so far claimed hundreds of lives, has weak leadership in the White House enabled Putin's bloody aggression? The associate editor of The Spectator, author of The Madness of Crowds, Douglas Murray, tackles the spineless presidency that's paved the way for Putin's tanks that's uncancelled, after a very quick look at what's coming up in Monday's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, we'll bring you the latest analysis on the war in Europe as the world comes to terms with Russia's previously unthinkable invasion of Ukraine and ponders just what on earth can be done to stop Putin. Plus, Russian-British commentator and friend of the show Konstantin Kisin explores whether a divided, distracted and weak West emboldened Moscow. And one of Britain's most outrageous stand-ups, Roy Chubby Brown, weighs in on attempts to cancel him after 6 decades of gags and the woke war on comedy. And as ever, I'm joined by my superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, social commentator Esther Kraku, and senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And breaking tonight, President Joe Biden has been condemned for smirking during a press conference after a day which saw at least 57 people killed and 169 wounded following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Biden's doddery and tone-deaf performance in front of the cameras this evening will offer no comfort to those hoping for a strong and coordinated response to Putin's act of war.
Did you underestimate Putin, and would you still describe him the way that you did this summer as a worthy adversary?
At the time, he was, I made it clear, as an adversary, and I say he was worthy. I didn't underestimate him. And I've read most of everything he's written. Did you read it? I shouldn't. You heard the speech he made, almost an hour for the speech of why he was going into Ukraine. He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about. And I think that his His ambitions are completely contrary to the place where the rest of the world has arrived.
Now, Putin's false belief that Ukraine is a made-up state that belongs to Russia is nothing new, but having a US president who has relinquished all authority on the international stage is new, and I'd say it's, frankly, a chilling development. The associate editor of The Spectator and author of The Madness of Crowds, Douglas Murray, joins me now. Douglas, great talk, big day. Has Putin been enabled somehow by weak leadership in the White House?
I wouldn't say just the White House. Putin has chosen his moment very well. He's been amassing forces on the borders of the Ukraine for a year now. This started last March. He started to get as many as 90,000 troops on the borders. So none of this is new. He's been waiting and watching. Last summer, of course, he watched as America withdrew from Afghanistan, handed the country back over to the Taliban, leaving huge amounts of kit. Vladimir Putin well remembers the Soviet scurrying from Afghanistan, and he knew that it heralded Soviet weakness at the time in the 1980s. And he knew that the American scurry, the NATO scurry from Afghanistan, also heralded weakness. He knows one thing above all, which is that the West is deeply fearful of war. He's correct. The West is fearful of war for very good reason. But that calculation by him means that he knows all the time that he can take a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. That's what he did in 2008 in South Ossetia. That's what he did 8 years ago with the Crimea. And it's what he's trying to do now. But there's no doubt about it, I think, that the basic vacuum at the top of the West, in the White House, the position of the president, the position of the vice president, is a seriously encouraging factor for Vladimir Putin.
So, Douglas, how worried should we be? Because I listened to that speech in the early hours of this morning from Putin, and I do feel like he was invoking the possibility of nuclear war.
Yes, he was. It was an extraordinary speech. I mean, first of all, he rewrites the history, of course. I mean, his version of the history, and the thing that his stooges in the West say, is that sort of NATO provoked this. And indeed, this whole claim of sending peacekeepers in to Ukraine, as if Ukraine needs thuggish, heavily armed Russian so-called peacekeepers. It was just one extraordinary aspect of the speech. But yes, the very clear threat of the speech is that he says anyone who dares to stand in our way will feel repercussions that their worst nightmares. And of course, he knows that the West is highly unlikely to want to take the risk of crossing over the tripwire that Vladimir Putin has set up. And I think now the question is going to be how much of Ukraine he's going to try to take, how much of it he will take, whether he tries to take just part of the eastern areas I say just, but it's come to that, but whether he tries to take the eastern areas, the Russian-speaking areas, whether he tries to push on to Kyiv and indeed take the whole country. If he tries to swallow the whole country, all sorts of things are going to happen. I would say that it's extremely hard to predict, obviously, but I would say that there's one thing that's very striking, which is I would be surprised if Vladimir Putin can afford a lengthy war in the Ukraine. That's even before we get onto the issue of the sanctions that are coming in, which is the absolute bare minimum that the Western states need to do at this stage. I would be surprised if even before those sanctions come in, Putin could afford a long war in the Ukraine. You know, the Russian economy is not doing well. The Russian economy is smaller than the size of the economy of South Korea, to give just one example. But of course, he spends massively on the military, the reasons that we've now just been reminded of. But whether or not he wants a long, drawn-out, protracted war, I would think not. He wants to move fast and take as much as he can. And as Biden quite accurately said, it does fit into a picture that he's told the West about for 3 decades. I mean, Condoleezza Rice remembers that when she was Secretary of State of the United States, she remembered being at a conference with Putin, indeed with NATO leaders, in which he referred to the Ukraine as not a country. And Condoleezza Rice said, we all sort of did a double take at the time. Did he really just say that? He said that. He's always thought that. He's always wanted to reform the Soviet Union. He pines for it like a lover pining for an ex. And this now, he's got to this stage of his career, you might say, also, by the way, I mean, this is a man who's been sitting in the Kremlin for 2 years. He's had an extraordinarily strange attitude toward coronavirus. I mean, even now, nobody can get within feet of him without having spent weeks in isolation. So he's been sitting in the Kremlin brooding. He's coming up to his 70th birthday. There are all sorts of personal rumors around him. And he clearly thinks this is an attempt to assert his legacy. This is what he's going to give back. But of course, we see what that means in reality, because Ukraine is a country. It's not a figment of anyone's imagination. Ukrainian people are a people. They have the right to defend themselves, the right not to be the subjects of unbelievable aggression by Vladimir Putin and his forces. But this is an extremely perilous moment, because Putin has read the West correctly. And that's one of the reasons why he's doing what he's doing.
Douglas Murray, fascinating analysis as ever from the author of The Madness of Crowds. Thank you so much, Douglas. Time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. My superstar panel back to reveal. There's Carol McGiffin, who's your nominee tonight.
For what? The
Greatest Britain. Let's start positive.
Okay, the Greatest Britain is a duo. It's Ant and Dec.
Why?
Well,
I mean, I love them, but why?
Because they managed to enrage a number of bedwetters on their Saturday night takeaway show by simply dressing up as women.
Oh yeah, you're not allowed to do that now.
No.
Apparently it was called woman face.
Woman face.
So we don't just have black face now.
No.
We have woman face.
Woman
I
face.
mean, how
I've got one of those.
You're allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Dominique, your nominee.
Mine is Nigel Farage, because I think
we always love to hear that
everyone
here.
on this Ukrainian-Russia crisis, I think he's brought some real common sense. So, yeah.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee is close to home, I believe.
So, yeah, my nomination this week is this lady.
Me.
This one right
Oh.
here. For her absolute gorgeous performance on the BBC Two show last night. She had integrity, intelligence, and she sustained it for 10 whole days.
It was difficult.
And with people who didn't
Yeah, so this is a big reality show that Dominique has taken part in about being young and black in Britain. We have a little clip of it so you can see what we're talking about.
It does remind me of stories like my mum would tell me about things that my dad would be involved in.
Dom's father suffered from drug addiction, which led to him taking his own life.
And even for me personally, my boyfriend was, like, stabbed to death. In my opinion, life is a very callous thing. And if you don't do life, life will do you.
Dominique, honestly, it was so powerful, so impressive. I knew none of that about you. I've always thought you're such an impressive young woman anyway, and knowing that you've had to overcome all of that just made me respect you even more. So Dominique Samuels is tonight's Greatest Britain.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Union jackass time now. Carol McGiffin, who are you nominating?
You just called me Carol Malone. Oh my God. Yeah, Sadiq Khan, and I think I've nominated him before, but again...
He's one of our faves.
Put the council tax up, he's bankrupted TfL, he's awarded himself a massive, massive chunk of that council tax rise, and still nothing works. He's a nightmare.
Nightmare.
Dominique Samuels, your Union jackass nominee.
Well, I mean, it's quite apt to say union, considering we're so far up America's backside, but I will say Joe Biden for being an absolute embarrassment on just about everything, especially the Ukrainian crisis. He's not fit to be president, let's be honest.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee.
Well, it pains me to say this, but it's Eurovision.
What have they done?
They have said that Russia will still take part despite the ongoing situation in Ukraine.
Oh.
Well, do you know what?
They'll cancel it for COVID, but not for war.
Well, I think out of those nominees, I'm going to go with Joe Biden because, well done, Dominique, you're a double winner tonight because
I think his performance was doddery and he was completely all over the place, and I have no faith that this man is going to lead us to peace in Europe. Carol McGiffin, Dominique Samuels, Amy Nicole, fabulous superstar panel tonight. Thank you for your company. I'm back Monday at 9 p.m. Time for headliners now, though. Good night.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGiven. Any wintry showers and strong winds tend to ease gradually overnight, leaving icy patches in their wake, but a drier and sunnier day is expected on Friday. There'll be some clear spells in the south and the east through the night, but during the evening, further rain, sleet and hill snow showers could cause issues for northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. As they fade away during the hours of darkness, they leave behind some slippery surfaces, some icy patches to wake up to on Friday. 0 to 1 Celsius for Scotland and Northern England, 2 to 4 for Northern Ireland, England and Wales. But Friday itself sees high pressure towards the southwest of the UK build across the country, and as a result the wind finally eases and those showers also ease. There'll still be 1 or 2 around first thing, southwest Scotland, northwest England into the Midlands. Otherwise plenty of sunny spells, and that sunshine becomes widespread by the afternoon. Up and down the country it's looking dry for a few hours, and with those sunny spells with lighter winds it will feel pleasant. Temperatures reaching 10 Celsius in the south, 8 or 9 for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But for Scotland, it turns cloudy by the end of the afternoon, as well as Northern Ireland. Outbreaks of rain move through here. Generally, it's light on and off rain, and that continues